All right, so the question says, which property is used in the equation m times g plus m times h is equal to m times the quantity g plus h? So we've got associative, commutative, distributive, and identity property. So I'm just going to go through one by one what these properties are, just to review all of them. So first we've got the associative property. The associative property deals with grouping, and it works for addition and multiplication. So in addition, if you are adding three numbers, so 3 plus 2 plus 7, and I'm going to write that over here too, so 3 plus 2 plus 7. So if we kept the order of the three numbers the same, the associative property tells us that I could group the 3 plus the 2 together, or I could group the 2 plus the 7 together, and it wouldn't matter. So over here, doing order of operations, I would do what's inside the parentheses first. So 3 plus 2 is 5, and then I would add 7, which gives me 12. On the other side, if I put the parentheses around the 2 plus 7, I get 9, and then I add that to 3, and I still get 12. So I would be able to put an equal sign here. The associative property tells me that when I'm adding three or more numbers together, the 3 plus the 2 plus the 7, I can put parentheses, or I can group the 3 plus the 2 first, or the 2 plus the 7 first, and I'm still going to get the same answer. The associative property also works for multiplication. So if I'm multiplying three numbers together, I should be able to group them differently and still get the same answer. So again, I'm going to multiply three numbers together. So I'm going to take 2 times 4 times 3, and I'm going to write it over here. I'm going to keep the order the same, but I'm going to move my grouping symbols. So this again is the associative property. I'm going to group the 2 times the 4 together, or I can group the 4 times the 3 together. So over here on the left, if I multiply 2 times 4 first, I get 8 times 3, which is 24. Over on the right, if I do what's in parentheses first, the 4 times the 3 is 12, and then I multiply that by 2, and I still get 24. So I can put an equal sign here. If I put the parentheses around the 2 times the 4, and then multiply by 3, or if I put the parentheses around the 4 times the 3, and then multiply by 2, I can put an equal sign here, because it's not going to matter the way that I group my numbers. And again, that only works with addition and multiplication. So next we're going to look at the commutative property. So the commutative property also works for addition and multiplication. So we're looking at the commutative property. So if I am adding two numbers together, I'm adding 2 and negative 9 together, the commutative property tells me that I can change the order. I can put negative 9 first, and then I can add that to 2. See, I'm changing the order of my numbers. I can put an equal sign here because 2 plus negative 9 is a negative 7, but if I take negative 9 plus 2, I still get negative 7. So I can put an equal sign between those two. The commutative property also works for multiplication. So if I were multiplying two numbers together, if I was taking 5 times negative 3, or if I wanted to switch them and put negative 3 times 5, either way my answer is going to be negative 15. So again, I can put an equal sign there. So the commutative property works for addition and multiplication, and you can switch the order of your numbers. So the third property they talk about is the distributive property. So this is letter C. So the distributive property, and generally they write it like this: A times B plus C is equal to A times B plus A times C. So this is the one where you might talk about the rainbows, or you might talk about the arcs. Any term on the outside needs to be multiplied by every term on the inside. So if I actually plugged in numbers here, so I could write 5 times the quantity of x plus 4, and I needed to simplify that. I would take the 5 on the outside and multiply it by the first term, which is x, And I would then add that to the 5 times the 4, which is 20. And then that's simplified. And then remember, do not add those together because those are not like terms. The 5x and the 20 are not like terms, so you would leave it like this. And that's what the distributive property is. And then the last property that we have is the identity property. So the identity property tells us that if you multiply a number by 1, you're going to get the same number. So the identity property says if you take A times 1, that's going to equal A. So if I actually plugged in numbers into that, it would mean if I'm going to take any number, negative 15, and I multiply it by 1, I always end up with that same number. That's the identity property. So if we look at our original problem again, and we had to figure out which property was being used, right here, a big hint is that we've got parentheses in there. But if I look, I'm taking what's on the outside and I'm multiplying it by every term on the inside. So when I take m times g, I get mg, and then I have a plus sign in the middle. And then when I take m times h, I get mh. So one reason that it might look a little funny is they have flipped what side of the equal sign it's on. We're used to having a problem look like this, where we have m times g plus h, and that's equal to, and then we would do the distributive property. We would take m times g plus m times h. But that we can see is the distributive property. We're distributing what's on the outside of the parentheses and multiplying it by everything that's on the inside of the inside. So my answer is C.